Hey everybody, welcome to the video. It's Friday, May 21st, and we're breaking down this monster 15-game slate that we have over on DraftKings. I think this may be the first 15-game slate of the year. I realized we had some 14 gamers and I think a couple of 13 gamers, but I'm not sure we've ever had a 15 full-on every single team in baseball slate this year, so it's going to be a monster one. We had every single team to pick from, a bunch of bats to talk about, and there's a lot of good pitching options as well, so it should be a good one. I'm looking forward to it. Sure you guys are as well. And if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out and I really do appreciate it. And if you don't follow me over on social media, you can find me in the handle in the bottom right corner of your screen. And if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon or just get some extra content, link is down below for that. For the projections, optimizer, ownership projections, rankings, cheat sheets, data sheets, Discord community, all that fun stuff, link is down below. And I do update everything throughout the day. So if you're interested, you know where to find it. But I think that's it for the plug, so without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as per usual, we'll start with the pitchers and move on to the bats. And up top, we'll talk about one of my favorite pitchers in baseball, Trevor Bauer, just shy of $12,000. It is a massive price point, but fortunately, if you want to roster him on these big slates, usually we have a lot of value bats to pick from, and things can change throughout the day, so there might be a cheap guy that ends up leading off or something like that that could also help out wanting to fit in Trevor Bauer. But he's $11,900 here, and going up against the Giants, who absolutely went off yesterday. I think they scored 18 runs versus the Cincinnati Reds. Tyler Mahle, who was a very chalky pitcher on the early side if you did play that. So hopefully if you did roster him, which a lot of people did, didn't kill you because of ownership in cash games. Obviously in tournaments that's going to hurt. But man, nearly 18 runs for the Giants. I said it was a nice park upgrade going to Cincinnati from San Francisco. But my goodness, they just absolutely went off. They put up a football score. Very, very good game from them. But I don't think it's going to happen here versus Trevor Bauer. Obviously I didn't think that was going to happen yesterday. But they're going to be back in San Francisco. It's definitely a pitcher-friendly park here. Only a 3.26 implied team total. He's a slight favorite. You got Alex Wood pitching for the Giants, and he's been pitching well this season, but I do think the Dodgers should be able to pick up a win here and a 8K prop as well. And looking at Trevor Bauer's numbers since last season, I think you guys get the idea, but he's been one of the best pitchers in baseball. 123 inning sample size, close to 110 pitches per game, which is one of the things I love about Trevor Bauer, where he's never going to have a short leash. He can usually just go as long as he wants. Obviously, he's not going to go like 150 pitches, but for the most part, compared to league average, he is very, very good on the pitches per game category. Less than a 2 ERA, 3.1 xFIP, 2.85 SIERA, 36% K rate, 12 Ks per 9. Doesn't really walk many guys. Doesn't give up much power whatsoever. So, yeah, Trevor Bauer, realized the Giants went off yesterday, so that might scare some people. But this season versus righties, I mean, they don't have terrible numbers. They've been good versus lefties, and they have fine like splits versus righties, but they are striking out at a 28% clip, which is quite a bit. So there should definitely be some strikeout upside here for Trevor Bauer. Then Ian Anderson, $10,500. If you want to save $1,400, you could always roster the pitcher going up against Pittsburgh because they just have one of the worst offenses in baseball. It doesn't feel great paying nearly $11,000 for Ian Anderson, to be honest, but it's just hard to pass up the matchup versus Pittsburgh. They have virtually no power. They will strike out a little bit, but just overall, I mean, I can't really expect much damage to be done here versus Ian Anderson. I'd imagine he's going to pick up a win here. Only a 3.4 implied team total against him. Pretty heavy favorite, 6.5 K prop as well. And looking at his numbers, he does have some strikeout upside. Since last season, he has close to a 30% K rate, 2.6 ERA, 3.45 xFIP. SIERA is kind of high, close to 4, but not overly concerned about it. Don't like the walks, but this is a Pittsburgh team that just doesn't really do much whatsoever. Like versus righties this season, they're not striking out a ton, 23% K rate. I mean, they're not striking out, but I mean, it's not like a high K rate, but no power. WRC plus is low, WOBA's pretty low, and everything else is just not very good whatsoever. So Ian Anderson, I think he's a fine option. If you do want to spend top dollar for him, it just feels like we're kind of overspending a little bit. I wish he was in the 9K range. I'd feel a little bit better about that, but that is a nice matchup here. And then if you want some cheaper mid-range pitchers here, we have Chris Paddack and Mike Minor, who get really, really good matchups. Chris Paddack goes up against Seattle Mariners, who kind of get no hit, it seems like, every single week now. So they're definitely viable. It's always viable to roster pitchers against them. And even though I'm not a huge Chris Paddack fan, just kind of a two-pitch guy for the most part, just doesn't really blow you away with his numbers. Only a 3.1 implied team total against him. Pretty heavy favorite, 5K prop, not really a big strikeout guy since last season. He's only got a 22.8% K rate. Won't really walk many guys, which is good. And Seattle's lineup overall is not that great, and you can see that by the indicator in the implied team total over in Vegas today. And like I said, they got no hit multiple times so far this season, one against Spencer Turnbull. So I don't think Chris Paddack should have too much trouble today. And if you're looking at their splits versus right-handed pitching this season, 25% K rate, not really walking a whole ton. 166 ISO, on base percentage below 300. I mean, not the worst numbers, not the greatest numbers either. They're kind of worse versus lefties, but it's still the Mariners lineup, and they're just not that great. And there's a reason you get the weekly. The Mariners are getting no hit through 7 innings. It seems like every single week. And then Mike Minor, $7,500. If you guys like good matchups, Mike Minor's got pretty much the best one you can ask for as a lefty, because if you're looking at the Tigers splits this season versus left-handed pitching, it is absolutely brutal. A 34.1% K rate, a terrible 54 WRC plus, a 0.66 ISO, just some really, really, really bad numbers. These are the worst numbers in the league versus left-handed pitching. So if you're just a fan of rostering pitchers in good matchups and you're a believer in that, Mike Minor is your guy. Notice not having, like, he's not the best pitcher out there, but he did have around 27 points, I think, in his first outing versus Detroit this season. 3.8 implied team total against him, decently heavy favorite, 5.5 K prop, and while his numbers aren't great, he still has a nice little 25.3% K rate since last season, and facing a team with over a 30% K rate versus lefties this season, I think he should be fine. Can't really see him getting blown up here, so I think he's a fine mid-range play, and I could see him being decently popular today, maybe to pair with a guy like Trevor Bauer, so you can, because you're not going to be able to go Trevor Bauer and Ian Anderson today. I just don't think that's going to be possible. So if you want to go Bauer with Minor, I know Tyler Glasnow's on the slate as well. Just don't love him pitching in Toronto because that's just the hitter's paradise. So I have a little bit of concerns there. But if you want to go Trevor Bauer, Mike Minor, that might not be the hardest thing to do in your lineups today. But as for right now, this are the pitchers I like. Obviously, some other guys will probably pop up for me later through the day as I have more time to dig into the slate. But as of right now, I think this is a nice little core four group of pitchers, so we can move right on to the bats. And as I always say, things can change throughout the day. If a guy hits in a different spot in the order, or if a guy just happens to be out, we obviously can't play them, or I'll change my mind on some guys. Or if a guy is hitting lower in the order, ends up hitting closer to the front, it's definitely going to be an upgrade for me. But we'll start with the catcher position, move around the diamond, hit the outfield as well. And up top, we have Salvador Perez, $5,000 going up against Jose Urena, who really sucks versus left-handed bats, but you can still use righties against him. I do think the Royals are one of the better stacks on this slate. And this Royals Park has definitely played two bats so far this season. Not sure if that's going to continue, but I think we can definitely use some Royals today versus Urena and whoever else Detroit happens to use in the bullpen, because it's definitely not that great of a bullpen. And so far this season, Perez is having some pretty solid numbers, batting 275, well above around 350, ISO above 220, 500 slugging. So if you got the money for Perez, or if you're just full stacking the Royals, I definitely like getting him in my lineups. Yan Gomes, $4,300. I feel like this is like the 5th day in a row, like the Washington Nationals, but they just keep finding themselves in good matchups here, and they got another good one in Jorge Lopez here, and it's supposed to be pretty warm for this game, so it's definitely going to be a boost for bats. Team total close to 5 here, and the Baltimore bullpen's not that great either, and obviously Jorge Lopez, not a very good pitcher. If you want to look at his splits since last season, it's not going to be overly impressive. 4.55 xFIP, 4.52 Sierra, 6.53 ERA, strikeout rate below 20%, doesn't really walk a whole lot of guys, but he's going to give you pitches to hit, ISO close to 200, and batting average close to 300 given up. So I do like all the Nationals here quite a bit. One of my favorite stacks on the slate once again. Then Stephen Vogt, $3,800 playing in Coors Field. So I like pretty much all the Coors Field bats today. And finally, we got some good weathers for Coors, because lately, which earlier in the season, we were talking like 20, 30, 40 degrees in Coors Field when it was blowing in. So while you're in Coors Field, the weather wasn't that great for hitting conditions. But now today, it's supposed to be around 80-some degrees. Winds are blowing out around 20 miles per hour. So it's already the best hitting park in baseball, although that Toronto stadium that they're playing is definitely giving it a run for its money. But it's going to be hot. Winds blowing out pretty hard, and we're in Coors Field. Yeah, it's going to be hitter's paradise today, and there's a reason why the over-under in that game is close to 11 today, so definitely like all the bats in this game. You get a nice lefty-righty matchup here versus German Marquez, who's not a pitcher I like to pick on too much, but he can struggle with the lefties, and again, the hitting conditions are just too good to pass up for Coors Field today. Dropping out of first base, we have Rhys Hoskins, $4,500 in a matchup here versus Martin Perez. And I don't know if you guys saw Martin Perez's price today, but I think he's around $9,000, which just seems a bit insane to me. Not that that matters here for running the roster any Phillies bats, but it just seems like a really expensive price tag for a guy that's just not very good. So I definitely like the righties here versus Martin Perez, and Rhys Hoskins has always had some good splits versus left-handed pitching. Josh Bell, $3,600. I could see him being very popular once again. I think he's been popular like for 4 days now, but he gets another good matchup here versus a righty where he is a switch hitter, but he does hit right-handed pitching much better. And team total close to 5, hits near the top of the order. Only $3,600, has some decent power. I know this season he's been playing terrible with a 180 batting average, but he does have an ISO close to 200. That number gets better versus right-handed pitching, so I do like Josh Bell quite a bit. Pavin Smith, $3,800. I realize I put that out of order, but he's also eligible in the outfield as well. should be leading off here for the Diamondbacks and get a cheap lefty on righty matchup here versus German Marquez. I do like him as long as he is in the leadoff spot. Dropping to second base, we have Whit Merrifield, $5,700 again, like all the Royals here versus Jose Urena. Don't care if they're a lefty or righty. I prefer lefties versus Urena, but still like Whit Merrifield here. You can hit both righties and lefties fine. Plus that DJ Pulpman is nothing to be scared of. Colton Wong, second base, $4,500 going up against Jeff Hoffman. Haven't talked about any Brewers yet, but I do think they're a decent stack today. You could even look at Travis Shaw, Omar Narvaez. I have Christian Yelich listed here, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but I think the Brewers are definitely playable in Great American Small Park here. Jeff Hoffman on the mound, not the greatest pitcher out there. Not terrible, but not that great either. Team total 4.65, which isn't super high. I could see that maybe getting closer to 4.7 before first pitch happens. But Colton Wong should be leading off here. Not a lot of power in his bat, but he just hit for a pretty high average. Doesn't really strike out too much, so I think Colton Wong is viable at his price point. Then Nick Madrigal, $2,900, should be batting second, assuming he does, since there's a lefty on the mound here. There's a righty, usually it's a little bit lower in the order, but versus a lefty, I'd imagine he's going to hit near the top here. Only $2,900. Jordan Montgomery, not a pitcher I usually stack against, but I think we could use a cheap righty one-off versus him because the guy can be a bit iffy. Sometimes he has some good games, sometimes he's kind of off for the most part. Only a 4.2 implied team total here, so not super excited about the White Sox, but as a hitter-friendly park in New York, I think he's an okay play. He's batting .275 this season, not a lot of power, less than a 100 ISO, but I think he's viable for the price point as long as he hits near the top of the order. Eduardo Escobar, $5,300 again, just stacking Coors Field for the most part. I know it feels kind of weird paying over $5,000 for Escobar, but he's had some decent power this season, over a 200 ISO, and he's a switch hitter, so the platoon advantage versus German Marquez, and they have a team total above 5, so like all of the Diamondbacks and the Rockies today for the most part. Ryan McMahon, speaking of the Rockies, $4,900. He's had some decent power this season with a 226 ISO, and you get a nice matchup here versus Seth Frankoff, and if you have no idea who that is, I totally understand, but they have a team total close to 6 here, and yeah, you can definitely load up on the Rockies. Lefties and righties are all included here, so like pretty much the entire lineup. Even though if I don't have them listed, I still probably like them. Like Dom Nunez, the catcher, I don't have him listed here, but I think he's a fine play, and just whoever else you can think of as well. And then Josh Fuentes, $3,200 again, like all the Rockies here, so I'm not going to sound like a broken record just saying it every single time, but you guys get the idea. Dropping to shortstop here, Trey Turner, $6,000, one of my most favorite players in the league. He's got power, he is for a high average, doesn't really strike out too much. He has elite stolen base upside any single time he gets on base, so love Trey Turner if you got the money for him. I think Trevor Story is probably going to be that chalky shortstop today, so if you're looking for the contrarian pivot, Trey Turner is your guy. And I like the Nationals quite a bit today. The Vegas implied team totals are run lower than the Rockies, which is definitely going to keep people on Trevor Story. Plus, he's $800 cheaper, so I totally understand that. But Trey Turner is still an elite play today. Trevor Story, $5,200, probably would end up being the most popular play in the slate, to be honest. Maybe not the most popular, but definitely going to be right up there. But $5,200 going to be hard to fade Trevor Story with how popular the Rockies should be today. Talking cash games for the most part. Obviously, you could fade him in tournaments for a guy like Trey Turner, but do like Trevor Story a lot today. Then Willie Dames, $2,900. Haven't really talked about any Rays guys, and which is kind of weird because they're playing in the Florida Stadium that the Blue Jays are hosting teams now, which is definitely a hitter's paradise. I feel like every single game they're scoring like 20 runs total. The problem is the Rays strike out a lot versus lefties, and I know Anthony Kay is not very good, but there's not many righties on the team that get you too excited. Like Adames, whatever his last name is pronounced, he's a fine play. Randy Arozareno's okay, but most of the good bats on this team are lefties, and I don't love it. I mean, you could still play Austin Meadows, Ji-Man Choi, Brandon Lau if you want, but they just don't grade out as well versus lefties. But they still have a team total close to 5 here. They probably won't be super popular because if you're looking at the splits versus lefties, they strike out a ton, but I think you could definitely get behind playing a few of these guys for sure. And they should be contrarian because I don't think people are going to like playing the Rays versus a lefty too much. If there's a righty on the mound here, they'd definitely be very popular because massive park upgrade going from Tampa Bay to the Toronto Stadium now. So you got to keep that in mind, but I do think the Rays are a decent contrarian stack today. And then dropping down to the outfield, we have Juan Soto, massive price tag, $6,100. And I feel like a lot of people are going to try to get Ketel Marte in there because it is Coors Field. So maybe Juan Soto goes a little bit overlooked, but I don't think that should be the case here. Nice lefty on righty matchup here. And liking all the bats here for Washington. Kind of already mentioned that with Trey Turner, kind of the similar plays there. So if I had to pick one, I'm probably going to side with Trey Turner, but it's a very close toss-up for me. Both are elite plays today. Ketel Marte, $5,300. Again, just stacking Coors Field. Only 28 plate appearances this season, but in those plate appearances. I know he's been hurt for a while recently, came back a few days ago, but he's batting 462 with a 566 WOBA, 385 ISO, 260 WRC plus, and some really good numbers. So if he can pick up where he left off, I think Ketel Marte is a fine play at $5,300. Brandon Ruiz Arena, $5,000. He's been hot recently, and he's one of the righties I talked about that I definitely do like here versus Anthony K. It's a hitter's paradise here, and he's been hot recently, and he's got a ton of power upside, so do like Randy today. Christian Yelich, $4,800. I kind of already mentioned this when I talked about Colton Wong, but you can use all the Brewers lefties here versus Jeff Hoffman, in my opinion. I think it's a pretty good spot for them, like the park that they're hitting in. Obviously, Great American Small Park, one of the best parks in the league for power, so do like Christian Yelich, even though in a small sample size this year, he has really not shown any power, and he is striking out quite a bit, but he is hitting for a decently high average. Charlie Blackmon, $4,800. I realize he hasn't been very good this year, but still going to be hitting at the top of the order here, below $5,000 with a team total close to 6. Yeah, you can definitely play Charlie Blackmon today. Kyle Schwarber, $4,400. He went deep again yesterday. Gets another good matchup here versus Jorge Lopez. He's just part of the national stack. Should be betting cleanup versus already, so do like Kyle Schwarber. We know he's got plenty of power versus right-handed pitching. David Peralta, $4,100. I feel like Peralta was around $5,500 for a few days a couple weeks ago. Now he's down to $4,100 and he's in Coors Field. So yeah, you can sign me up for that. Should be betting cleanup for one of the best stacks in the entire slate. Raimel Tapia, $4,000. He pretty much has no power, but he can hit for a high batting average, has some speed as well. Should be hitting leadoff for arguably the best team on the slate today. So I do like Tapia. Then Benintendi, $3,600. Just a nice cheap lefty here versus Jose Urena. For the most part, the roles you want to play are righties like Jorge Soler, Salvador Perez, Whit Merrifield, but you could definitely get on some Andrew Benintendi here, $3,600. I didn't realize he's not the most exciting hitter to roster, but he has been hitting for a decently high average this year, so I think he's fine at $3,600. But yeah, with that being said, guys, I think that's going to be it for the video, so I appreciate you watching, and if you haven't already, make sure you leave a like on the video if you did find it helpful. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and if you want to follow me over on social media, Pennell16 on Twitter, CPen16 over on IG. And if you do want to help support the channel over on Patreon, link is down below for that. But I think that's pretty much it, guys. I will stop rambling and hope you guys enjoy the start to your weekend.